The notary was smiling at my brother like he'd already won. That smile practiced, papery, the kind you buy with a retainer fee stretched across her face while she slid the documents across my grandfather's mahogany desk. My brother reached for the pen without reading a single word. He never read anything. That was always his first mistake. I sat in the corner of the room, hands folded in my lap, watching. My mother kept glancing at me, not out of guilt, out of habit, the way you check a door you think you've already locked. I let her look. I had nothing to hide. Not anymore. My grandfather died on a Tuesday in March, the kind of cold Tuesday that feels like the world forgot to change the calendar. He was 81. He had a bad hip, a good mind, and a vegetable garden in the backyard that he tended to like it was sacred ground. He called me every Sunday. He remembered my college roommate's name, my dog's birthday, the exact day I passed my CPA licensing exam. He was the only person in my family who treated me like I belonged there. His name was Harold, and the week after we buried him, my family tried to steal everything he left me. I should tell you who I am, because it matters to what happens next. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I work as a forensic accountant for a federal oversight agency. I find money that people think they've hidden. I trace transfers, flag anomalies, reconstruct financial trails from nothing but timestamps and desperation. I have done this for 7 years. I am, without false modesty, very good at it. My brother is named Derek. He is 35, perpetually between jobs, and has the unshakable confidence of someone who has never once been held accountable for anything. Growing up, he was the one my parents planned futures around. Sports scholarships they bragged about at church before he dropped out. Business ideas they funded with money they didn't have. Every birthday card I gave my parents growing up, I signed my name at the bottom, just below the space they left for his. My mother's name is Patricia. My father's name is Gene. They are not evil people in the movie villain sense. They are something quieter and harder to name people who decided, sometime before I was old enough to understand it, that one of their children was worth more than the other. And then they spent 30 years acting accordingly. I don't say this with bitterness anymore. I say it the way you described the weather. It simply was. My grandfather saw it. He never said so directly. He was a man who preferred action to commentary, but he saw it. And when he sat down with his attorney 14 months before he died, he made decisions that reflected what he saw. The estate was not complicated. There was the house, a 4-bedroom colonial, on just under an acre in western Pennsylvania, paid off, assessed at just under $400,000. There was a brokerage account. There was a small amount of cash. And there was a letter, handwritten, that his attorney had instructions to read aloud at the family meeting following the filing of the will. I found out about all of this the way I found out about most things in my family, not directly, but through inference. My mother called me 3 days after the funeral and said, with the particular brightness she uses when she wants something, that we needed to get together, as a family, to handle things. What things? I asked. You know, she said, Grandpa's affairs. I knew. I also knew that tone. That tone had cost me, over the years, a great deal. A semester abroad I didn't take because my brother needed bail money. A car I didn't buy because my parents needed a loan they never repaid. A relationship I nearly lost because I spent so much energy managing my family's chaos that I had nothing left for anyone else. I told her I would be there. Then I hung up and called my own attorney. Her name is Renata. She has 20 years of estate law experience, an office full of plants she actually keeps alive, and a gift for explaining complex legal mechanisms in plain language. I had retained her 8 months earlier, after my grandfather told me quietly, over the phone on a Sunday, that he had updated his will and that I should have someone I trusted looking out for me when the time came. He said that? Renata asked when I told her. He said, Claire, when I'm gone, your mother is going to try to rewrite history. Make sure someone who knows the law is standing next to you. Renata was quiet for a moment. Then she said, he sounds like a smart man. He was the smartest person I knew. We talked for 2 hours that first call. By the end of it, I understood exactly what I was entitled to, exactly what could be challenged and how, and exactly what steps I needed to take before anyone else in my family started moving pieces around the board. The first step was one my grandfather had already taken care of, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The family meeting was scheduled for a Saturday at my parents' house 2 weeks after the funeral. My grandfather's attorney, a quiet, methodical man named Stuart, was supposed to attend to walk everyone through the will. Stuart called me on the Thursday before. I want to make sure you're prepared, he said carefully. For what specifically? A pause. Your brother contacted my office on Monday. He came in person on Wednesday. He had questions about the property transfer process and whether a will could be amended posthumously under certain circumstances. I let the silence sit for a second. Can it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. No, Stewart said. A will cannot be amended after the testator's death. I explained this to him. I want you to know I explained this to him clearly. I appreciate that, Stewart. I also want you to know, he continued, that I have no way of controlling what documents your family might produce that did not originate from my office. There it was. I thanked him. I called Renata. And then I made a phone call to a colleague at work, a man named Paul, who works in a division adjacent to mine, and who owes me a considerable professional favor. And I asked him a very specific question about property liens, protective filings under Pennsylvania estate law. He answered it. I spent Friday evening at Renata's office, signing paperwork. The Saturday meeting started at 11 in the morning. My mother had put out coffee and a plate of pastries, the way she does when she's performing normalcy. Derek was already there when I arrived, leaning against the kitchen counter with his phone in his hand, not looking up when I walked in. My father shook my hand. He has always been more awkward about it than my mother. She commits fully to whatever they've decided, and he follows at a slight delay, like an echo. Stewart arrived at 11:15. He sat at the dining room table, opened his folder, and began. My grandfather's will was straightforward. The brokerage account, approximately $60,000, was to be split evenly between my mother and her sister, my Aunt Deborah, who lives in Arizona and was joining by phone. The cash was to be donated to a veterans organization my grandfather had supported for decades. The house, the colonial, the garden, the 4 bedrooms, the acre of land was left entirely to me. The room did a particular kind of quiet when Stewart read that part. Not surprised quiet. Prepared quiet. My mother set down her coffee cup very gently. Derek looked up from his phone for the first time all morning. My father looked at the table. Stewart continued. There was the letter. He unfolded it and read it aloud in the measured, neutral tone of a man who has delivered difficult news many times and understands that his job is to be the document, not the reaction. My grandfather had written that the house had been his home for 43 years, that he had fixed the gutters himself until he was 77, that the garden in the back had his wife's rose bushes in the corner, the one she planted the year they moved in, and he expected whoever lived there next to leave them alone. He wrote that he had watched his family carefully over many years, and that he was leaving the house to me because, in his words, Claire is the only one who ever came to visit without wanting something. Derek made a sound that wasn't quite a word. My mother picked up her coffee cup again and took a very slow sip. I looked at the roses on the wallpaper border near the ceiling. My grandfather had let my grandmother pick that wallpaper. He'd hated it for years and then, after she died, refused to take it down. I did not cry. I had already cried, alone, the week before. This moment, I needed to be clear-eyed for. Stewart left at 12:30. My Aunt Deborah said her goodbyes over the phone, her voice careful and kind, and I could tell she already understood what was coming and wanted no part of it. Smart woman. My mother waited until we heard Stewart's car pull out of the driveway. Then she turned to me with an expression, I know well, the one that looks like warmth but is actually inventory. Claire, she said, I think we need to have a real conversation about what's practical here. Okay, I said. The house, she said, needs a lot of work. It didn't. My grandfather had kept it immaculately. But this is how it starts. You establish that the thing is a burden, so the person feels like they're being helped when you take it away. The roof alone, my father said, on cue. And Derek, my mother continued, has been going through such a hard time. You know about the situation with the business. I did not know about any situation with any business, because Derek had not had a functioning business in 4 years. But I nodded. We were thinking, she said, and the we landed with a weight that told me this had been rehearsed, that it might make more sense for Derek to take over the property, handle the upkeep. You're so busy with work. You're all the way in Maryland. Mom, I said. She stopped. I'm not selling the house. The warmth left her face like a light switching off. Derek set his phone face down on the counter. You're being selfish, he said. He said it the way people say things they've practiced, too smooth, too ready. Grandpa was specific, I said. Stewart read it aloud. Stewart works for a dead man, Derek said, and old men get confused. I looked at my brother for a long moment. He is not a complicated person. He is a person who has always gotten what he wanted through persistence and my parents' willingness to make other people uncomfortable on his behalf. He had never in his life encountered a wall he couldn't eventually wear down. He had never encountered me as a wall before. I have a 2-hour drive back to Maryland, I said. I'm going to head out. I hugged my mother, who accepted it stiffly. I shook my father's hand. I did not hug Derek. I drove 40 minutes, pulled into a rest stop, and called Renata. "How did it go?" she asked. "Exactly as expected," I said. "How are our filings?" "Recorded with the county on Friday afternoon," she said. "The lien is active. Anyone running a title search on that property is going to find it before they find anything else." "Good," I said. "Claire," she paused. "They're going to try something." "I know," I said. "That's why we're ready. I want to be precise about what I had done because it matters." Before the family meeting, I had filed a protective lien against the property, a legal instrument that attaches to a piece of real estate and must be resolved before any sale or transfer can be completed. My grandfather's will was filed with the county. The property was in my name the moment the will cleared probate, which Stewart had already initiated. Any title search the kind any legitimate buyer or their bank would run before purchasing a property would immediately surface the lien, the will, and my name as the rightful owner. There was no version of a sale that could complete without going through me. I had also done one other thing. I had placed a monitoring alert on the property's county records. If anyone filed anything, any document, any application, any transfer request against that parcel, I received an email notification within 24 hours. My grandfather used to say that the best time to fix a fence is before the neighbor's dog gets out. He would have appreciated the metaphor. The notification came on a Wednesday, 18 days after the family meeting. I was at my desk eating lunch when my phone buzzed. I looked at the email. A deed transfer document had been filed with the county recorder's office that morning. The grantor listed on the document was my grandfather's estate. The grantee was Derek. The signature on the transfer was mine. I sat very still for a moment. Then I forwarded the email to Renata, called her, and described what I was seeing. "They forged your signature on a deed transfer," she said. "Yes." "And filed it with the county recorder." "Yes." I could hear her exhale. "Claire, that's not a civil matter. That's a crime." "I know," I said. "Multiple, actually. Forgery. Filing a fraudulent instrument. Potentially wire fraud depending on how they transmitted it. Possibly more." "What do you want to do?" I thought about my grandfather's rose bushes. I thought about 31 years of birthday cards with my name written smaller. I thought about every loan, every sacrifice, every time I told myself that family was complicated and this was just how it was. "I want to do this right," I said. "All the way right. No shortcuts." "Then you need to report it to the county recorder immediately, file a fraud report, and then we go to the DA. Already pulling up the recorder's contact page, I said, "I am going to tell you what happened quickly, because the legal process itself is slow and procedural and mostly involves paperwork, and the paperwork is not the point. The point is what the paperwork produced." The county recorder flagged the document within hours of my report. A forensic document examiner confirmed within 2 weeks that the signature was not mine. The DA's office opened an investigation. During that investigation, they subpoenaed phone records and found text messages between my mother and Derek discussing, in fairly explicit terms, where to find a sample of my signature, how to transfer the property before I made a fuss, and whether the county recorder's office actually checked this stuff. They did not check often, but they did check when someone reported fraud. My father, to his credit, had not participated in the texts. Whether this was conscience or simply poor phone habits, I cannot say. He was not charged. My mother and Derek were each charged with forgery, filing a fraudulent public record, and criminal conspiracy. The DA's office was thorough. They did not miss things. The trial took 8 months from indictment to verdict. I testified once for about 40 minutes. I brought documentation. I was calm. I had spent 7 years being calm in rooms where money had been hidden or stolen or misrepresented, and I understood that calm, in those rooms, is its own form of precision. The jury deliberated for less than a day. My mother received 3 years, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. She was 61 years old. She cried in the courtroom in a way that I think was partly real. I did not look away from her when she cried. I thought she deserved to be seen. Derek received 4 years. He did not cry. He looked at me once, from across the courtroom, with an expression I'd seen on his face my whole life, the particular frustration of someone who cannot understand why the world is not cooperating. I looked back at him steadily until he looked away. I moved into my grandfather's house in November. The drive from Maryland took just under 2 hours. I had 1 carload of things I needed immediately and a moving truck scheduled for the following weekend. When I pulled into the driveway for the first time as the person who lived there, it was late afternoon, and the light was doing something golden flat across the front yard, the way it does in Pennsylvania in November when the leaves are almost gone. I sat in the car for a few minutes. I thought about how many times I'd pulled into this driveway as a child, for Sunday dinners and holidays, and the occasional Wednesday when my grandfather just called and said, "Come over." I made soup. I thought about sitting at his kitchen table while he explained things to me, how to balance a checkbook, why you should always read a contract twice, the difference between someone who wants to help you and someone who wants to appear to be helping you. He was teaching me, I understood now, every Sunday, all those years. I got out of the car. I let myself in with a key I had carried on my keychain since March, since the week after he died, because Stuart had given it to me with a quiet nod that said everything. The house smelled like him, like wood smoke and old books, and something I can't name that was just the smell of a house that had been lived in carefully for 43 years. I walked through every room slowly. I ran my hand along the wallpaper border in the dining room roses, faded now, the colors my grandmother had chosen. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. Then I went out the back door into the garden. The rose bushes were bare, the way roses are in November, just brown canes and the memory of what they'd been. But they were there, exactly where she had planted them, all those years ago. Exactly where he had tended them, every spring, long after she was gone. I crouched down and put my hand on the cold ground next to the roots. I said, out loud, to no one, and to him, I'm going to leave them exactly where they are. My Aunt Deborah called that night. She had driven up from the airport and was staying at a hotel 20 minutes away, and she asked if she could come see the house. She stood in the kitchen and looked at the wallpaper border and pressed her lips together. He loved this ugly wallpaper so much, she said. He hated it for years, I said. And then he didn't. She nodded. She understood. We sat at the kitchen table and drank coffee and talked about him, not about the will, not about my mother and Derek, not about any of it, just about him, the soup, the garden, the way he could fix anything mechanical, but was completely defeated by his television remote, the birthday cards he sent with $5 inside, long after $5 stopped being meaningful, because that was what his father had done. Around 9 o'clock, she stood up to leave and hugged me for a long time. He picked right, she said. After she left, I locked the front door and turned off the kitchen light and stood in the dark house for a moment. Here is what I did not expect, how quiet it would be. Not the absence of noise the house made its ordinary sounds, the furnace, the pipes, the particular creak of the third stair, but a quieter kind of quiet. The kind that comes when something that has been held in tension for a very long time finally releases. I had spent so many years bracing for the next thing my family would need, the next request, the next performance of obligation. The constant low-level monitoring of what they might want and whether I would be able to refuse it. It was like carrying a weight I had grown so used to that I had forgotten it was heavy, until I set it down. I was not happy in a simple way. Simple is for people who haven't paid as much as I had to get somewhere. But I was standing in my grandfather's house, my house, and the rose bushes were in the back garden, and the wallpaper was on the dining room wall, and his good mind had seen clearly, at the end, what needed to happen. That felt like enough. That felt actually like everything. If any of this mirrors something you've lived through the invisible child, the family that keeps score in a way you didn't agree to, I want to hear from you in the comments. And if you know someone who needs to hear that it's possible to come out the other side of something like this, send this to them. I'll be here next week with another story. Take care of yourself.